What is up, everybody? My name is Mitchell Brewer, and today we are going to discuss the 2003 Busch Light Clash at the LA Coliseum, and if it was a success or not. Of course, it was coming off of a year one of the event where entering it, everybody was kind of skeptical of, is this actually going to work? Are they actually going to be able to put a racetrack inside of the stadium? How's the race going to be? How's the show going to be? And overall, it proved to be a gigantic success for NASCAR. They had a big increase in viewership from the previous year that was at Daytona. Crowd was good. The atmosphere is great, and it led to NASCAR deciding, okay, we're going to do this for a year too, which a lot of people kind of were curious about if it would have the same luster that it had in year one, or if it was going to decline, if people weren't going to care as much about this race, if the drivers weren't going to care as much about this race, if it was just going to become another event, which kind of happened to the Busch Light Clash when it was at Daytona, where no matter how many different ways they tried to dress it up, it still didn't seem like it was the most thought after event, an event that actually mattered, to put it in simple terms. But yeah, so let's talk about it. Let's just go right away with the facts, and I'll interject my opinion here at the end of this. So, according to the LA Times, about 50,000 fans attended the race. I know a lot of people were making comments about the crowd during the heat races, but the heat races, let's just be frank, weren't very well attended. I know there were some comments online about how the tickets actually didn't even advertise the heats. They just advertised the main event start time, which, again, similar to last year, and as others have pointed out, similar to the trend in LA events, the crowd shuffled in when it was time for the main event. And yeah, I know a lot of people don't believe that there's 50,000 fans there. I don't know why. That place was, I'm not going to say it was full, but it was a pretty decent crowd for a venue that can seat, I believe it's 73,000 fans. I would say there was more than 50% there. So yeah, I think that was a decent crowd for exhibition race, a race that doesn't have any points on the line. And especially when you have a crowd like that compared to the ones that you had in Daytona, where it didn't seem like anybody was showing up to the Clash at the ending stages there. It does really help make the race feel more important. Now, the other side of that coin is how many people were watching at home. Last year, it was 4.283 million, as we talked about earlier. That was a big increase from previous year's Clash. It is important to note that previous years were on FS1 instead of Big Fox, but still 4 million viewers is a pretty solid number. This year saw a slight decrease with 3.647 million TV viewers. They again went up against the Pro Bowl and also went up against the Grammys, which was not the case last year. Either way, I know it is a decrease, but it's still a relatively pretty good number for NASCAR, especially when you consider the fact that this was the most watched race since the 2022 Coca-Cola 600 last May. So this race got more viewers than all of the playoff races, including the championship race. So I don't think, just because there was a decrease in viewership, which I think was going to happen, I don't want NASCAR thinking that, oh, this was because it was a night race. I don't think that's the reason that there was this decline. I think that was just going to happen. I think there was a lot of people that maybe don't watch NASCAR that were going to only tune in for the first event just because they're racing in the Coliseum. However, to retain that big of an audience for this race, 3.64 million, I still think, I'm not going to say it's a gigantic win for NASCAR, but I'm also not going to say that's the massive L that people are trying to say that was, because I don't think it was. Over 3.5 million viewers, that's pretty solid for NASCAR. So let's actually talk about the race itself, because we can talk about how many people are in attendance, we can talk about how many people watch at home, but it doesn't really mean anything if the event itself kind of sucks, which I don't think it did. And there were don't get me wrong, there were things that could be improved, but let's talk about the things that really worked for this event. First off, I think the heats were just fantastic. The length was perfect. There was plenty of action in these short little events. I know sometimes when you got to the end of the races, the 3 or 4 cars that were able to advance to the main event, might be able to get away, but there's still storylines that you were watching it. Like guys like Chase Elliott were racing in the LCQs. That's the biggest name in NASCAR right now, having to work his way into the main event, and that itself made these heats even more interesting. The overall production of this event, I'm not talking TV production, I'm just talking about everything associated with this event, really made this seem like it was a big deal. And I know like the driver introductions were kind of corny, but like I don't know, there's just this way that they presented this race that I wish they could do for every single race. And I know Denny Hamlin actually talked about that on his podcast, Actions Detrimental. But it really, like, man, it felt like a big, like, there's that term that's the big fight feel, and that's what this really felt like, and this felt important. Even though, in the grand scheme of things, there wasn't much on the line for these guys, this still felt like a very big race, and NASCAR deserves the praise for making this race that, I'll be honest, I thought should have been eliminated years ago matter again. And that's something big to put in NASCAR's cap, just because like that's a common thing with all-star events in all sports. Even the NFL, which is the juggernaut of sports right now, they're struggling to figure out what do we do with the Pro Bowl. Like, why does no one care about this? How do you get players to care about this? And I mean, this is one of the all-star events. I mean, if you want, I know we have an all-star race at North Wilkesboro, but this, I just throw it in the same category. And the fact that drivers were beating and banging and, like, actively mad at each other, and it showed that they wanted to win this race, which, I mean, it says a lot. It says a lot to make athletes care about these types of events that may not matter as much as a regular season race, but man, it mattered, and I think NASCAR deserves a lot of credit. I don't even know if they're going to get a lot of credit for that, for making this actually feel important, even if it is at a tiny little racetrack inside of a stadium, even if they're going much slower than the average NASCAR race. This felt like a big event, and I don't think you can take that away from NASCAR. And the other thing with this race that I personally noticed was the younger demographic that was in the audience at the racetrack. They seemed like they were having fun with all of this. I know I heard on Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi's podcast that they were hooting and hollering throughout the entire race. I know Fox did a really good job of showing how much fun the college-age people that were in the stands were having during the Wiz Khalifa concert. And here's the other thing about that, too. I know that Wiz Khalifa is not everybody's cup of tea. I know that Cypress Hill isn't everybody's cup of tea. But this was good. Like, the crowd that was there enjoyed it, and I think it shows that they don't need to be doing the same exact types of pre-race concerts at each race. You can branch out a little bit. I personally would like to see more of an alternative band at one of these races. I'm not a big Wiz Khalifa fan, believe it or not. And I was more excited about this concert than I am for Dierks Bentley at the Daytona 500. This Wiz Khalifa I could actually at least hear on a more top 100 radio station, where Dierks Bentley, I don't even know the last time he made music. No offense to him. The only song that I can distinctly remember is the Sideways cover that he did for, or not cover, but like Fox edition that he did, which slaps. And if he doesn't perform that at the Daytona 500, he will be hearing from me. But like, getting back to a serious note, this showed that like having this race in this area where you could bring in a lot of college kids, it worked. It really did, and they seemed to have fun. I'd be willing to bet that those college age people that were at the race, they might be more willing to come back to the Busch Light Clash when it comes to the LA Coliseum. They might be willing to drive to Fontana for the race this year or the short track race that'll be coming in the future. I think that it works for this, and I think that they really did a good job making it a fun atmosphere and making it a fun atmosphere without ruining the sanctity of the race. Like, the race still mattered, the event was still fun. I think that's a major win for NASCAR. So, moving into what they could work on, and these are going to be real, like, going back to the college students that were at the race, they're probably not going to care about these types of things, which I think is another big W for NASCAR. But for your more, like, dedicated audience, I do think you have to throw them a bone and work on a few things with the race structure itself. My big thing, and it's not even the aggressiveness that we saw in the main event, which we'll get to. I honestly didn't care for the LCQs. And I mean, we've seen last chance qualifiers matter in these types of races. We saw at Eldora one of the most memorable moments in the Truck Series in quite a long time when Norm Benning raced his way in through the last chance qualifier. That mattered, and people were genuinely invested in that and the stories that went along with it. Whereas, I think they should have just made this a one last chance qualifier. There's two of them with the top three advancing. And I think, I know there's questions of how many cars they can have on the track at the same time, the tightness, the compactness. I think that would have worked way better for the last chance qualifier than it did having two races. And maybe you get too much aggressiveness like you saw in the main event. But I think it's going to make these races a lot more enjoyable. I also think the lengths of the last chance qualifiers were a little too long. The fact that Fox was able to go to a commercial break during these last chance qualifiers, I think, is a red flag to me where maybe we shouldn't be doing this. I don't know. That's just my opinion. That was my big thing, that if they could fix one thing with this race, that would be that. The overall race length in the main event, and maybe this is just because of the aggressive drivers, which we'll get to, but I don't know. Like, this is an event that the main event shouldn't be more than hour and a half, 2 hours. And I know that seems short, but like when you have the heats, the last chance qualifiers all before this, that's already an hour there. Probably hour and a half, and then you're going to dedicate this race, I don't know what the ending total time was. It felt like it was a 3-hour race, which is hilarious for how short it was supposed to be. And I remember last year, I think the race length was relatively close to the same, where it was a pretty quick race just because we didn't have those cautions. So it is a tough thing to manage, and it may go with the aggressiveness. And I don't know how you can change this from the drivers. I think, I watched the race that Dale Earnhardt Jr. competed in at Florence, and they did a really good job. They may have been over-policing the aggressiveness from drivers. I know Dale Jr. at one point even got penalized for aggressive racing. And, I think NASCAR needs to kind of tippy-toe on that line there, where you don't want to over-police the event. But I do think that you do want to police it a little bit, because it did admittedly get out of hand pretty quickly during the main event, and it just kind of spiraled from there. So I think that could be something that NASCAR looks into if they continue this at a stadium, if they continue this at the LA Coliseum. So with that being said, before I get into my final thoughts about this, the podium thing, fantastic. I like that a lot. I don't think you need to do medals every single week, but I like doing a podium for NASCAR. I know it's just blatantly ripping off Formula One, but who gives a crap? I mean, it. If all else, it's getting the drivers in front of the fans more, and I think Door Bumper Clear talked about that on their podcast this week, which I think you need to do. I think it was Brett Griffin that said that you should just have it on the front stretch at the end of every single race, which, yeah, you absolutely should. At the bare minimum, it's a fun thing for the fans. The drivers can pose for a picture, and the fans can see those drivers that finish 1, 2, 3. At best case, you get a situation where, let's say if Bubba Wallace finished third, you have him and Austin Dillon on the same podium with two guys that probably weren't very happy with each other at the end of the race on Sunday night. And they might be butting heads a little bit, and creates that awkward tension, which is great TV, great for the fans to watch. I'm all about that. The driver intros with the teams, that was another thing they did different. I go back and forth. The way they came out and the stage that they had was really cool. The comedian, I think it was Joel McHale, who, no offense to Joel McHale, he does great work. I just don't like, they do this at other racetracks where they make it a joke, and it's Kevin Harvick. It's, I don't know what other stupid jokes they were making during it. I mean, it's pre-race introductions. Just say, hey, and I don't even care if you do it via teams. I think it means a little bit more if you do it individual drivers, but the team thing looked cool as well. Hey, here's Stewart-Haas Racing with NASCAR Cup Series champion Kevin Harvick, playoff contender last year Chase Briscoe, veteran Eric Almirola, and newcomer to the team Ryan Preece, just to make it not a joke. And I think that's a big problem that NASCAR kind of has with its reputation, where you have like Talladega Nights, which, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed Talladega Nights, but it kind of played into the are people going to take NASCAR seriously because of this movie, or is it going to be shake and bake, these guys are crazy rednecks kind of vibes? Or with like that Kevin James Netflix show that they did where it was a comedian, or it was a comedy. I think you need a little bit more seriousness with it. I really like at Bristol when they bring in Buffer. I think that's great. I think you need to have somebody that can really bring the intensity to this type of event with that type of pre-race introductions. But yeah, overall, personally, before I give my final thoughts, I think I enjoyed the event. I thought it was great. I was satisfied with it. I don't think I at any point thought the race, man, this is boring. I mean, the cautions that were breeding after the Wiz Khalifa concert, you would have thought the guys would have been hanging out with him, smoking a little something with the way that they were driving. But I was satisfied with the race. Congratulations to Martin Truex Jr. Big win for him, and getting back into victory lane after a quiet 2022. So now the big question is, should this race come back to the Coliseum? Should there be another race at the Coliseum? Should there be a points race at the LA Coliseum? And personally, where I stand is I would like to remain the Busch Light Clash at the LA Coliseum. I think this is the perfect venue for something like this. I think you can easily get 50,000 people in there, if not even more, the more that you do this. I think it's worth doing for year 3 to see if that novelty continues or if it patters off. Because the fans in attendance, it looked like it was a fairly similarly attended race to last year. And that's a good sign for NASCAR as far as that. And I think that it works. I think it works having this race as this exhibition race. Now, as far as the thing that I worry about moving the race to a different stadium or a different type of configuration is it going to work? And I mean, to credit Ben Kennedy, he has made a lot of risky moves with the NASCAR schedule, which I think have all worked. I think you can look at this has worked, the LA Coliseum. I think you can look at Bristol Dirt, which, as much as people hate on that race, more people are attending that race, more people are watching that race. I think it's probably a success. And we'll see how the street race at Chicago works. So, I mean, I get that NASCAR is all about taking risk right now, and they're good at it. However, it's just like, it'd be a real shame to see this event move to another stadium. The perfect place for it, that in my opinion, if they're going to want to move it, is like MetLife in New Jersey. I think that would be a good place just because of the market there. But it's just like, you can't really run this race in February in New York, New Jersey area. B, is the track that they produce there going to be as good as the one at the LA Coliseum? That's the I feel with it. I wouldn't blame NASCAR if they moved this race to a different stadium, but I think that it's working very well, and I think that it should stay, if I have to be blatantly honest with you. Now, should it stay and be a points race? That's a different question, and it's tough, because I go two ways with this. With my brain, I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a pretty well-attended event. You're not going to have a race at Auto Club Speedway next year, and you're not going to get these numbers at Irwindale or any of the other short tracks that are in the area in that LA market. So, to me, that makes sense. But then you have my heart, and it's just like, does it lose its luster if it's not the Clash? Does it lose its luster if it has to be a more actually seriously taken event? You have to do a lot of convolutedness just to make this race, a points race, because you're not going to be able to have 36 cars on that track at once, let alone 40 if they have a steep entry list for that race. I mean, that's all stuff that's tough to try and deal with if you're NASCAR. And it's just like, is this too out there for a points race? You could make that argument, and you'd probably be right. I don't know. I think it works as is right now, and I think it could get better if they chose to continue running with it as is and become a staple event that everybody looks forward to every single year. So, yeah, that is my opinion on all this. I know this wasn't like an analytical analyzing everything that happened in the race, but that's not really what I intended this video to be. And if you want more of that, feel free to comment that in the comment section below. Feel free to share your opinions about this. Did you think this race was a success or a failure? Do you think that NASCAR should continue doing this? Do you think NASCAR should get the heck out of LA and not run at that stinking stadium track ever again? Do they just need to get rid of stadium racing altogether? And I know I'm making fun of people that say that type of stuff, but I mean, if you can put together a concise argument about it, I'm willing to listen. And again, I'm not trying to make fun of anybody. I want us all to enjoy NASCAR, and I'm very excited for the upcoming NASCAR season, and I hope you stick around with me and subscribe here. Follow us at Black Hat Sports on Facebook. And as always, my name's been Mitchell Brewer, and thank you for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your week.